Welcome to the Daily Reflection. My name is Liam. Thanks for joining me today. On this podcast, we talk about sobriety, motivation, mental health, addiction, spirituality, personal growth, and what it's really like to try to build a better life on the other side. Make sure you subscribe. This podcast is available on video only on YouTube, as well as available on Amazon, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Now, before we get started, I always like to read a quick prayer out of the book, The Daily Reflections, where the podcast got its namesake. This one's called Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows, and they retaliate. So today I want to talk a little bit about fear, as well as where that fear can bring us, both inside of our sobriety and in our active use. And I also want you to remember that quitting drugs and alcohol is not just about willpower. Spiritual health, getting over that malady of spiritual sickness, is what allows us to maintain our sobriety in long term. But let's talk about fear. They say that most people in active use and in early recovery do live with a lot of fear, and the fear is of going back out, falling off the wagon, and the shame that comes with it. And what I want to remind people is there is no shame in, for lack of a better word, screwing up. I used to feel so much shame when I would be doing well. I'd be sober for, sometimes a few days, sometimes a few weeks. And then all of a sudden I'd go back out, I'd drink again. And the shame that I'd feel afterwards was astronomical. I feel like I'd let my family down. But remember, your family loves you, and there are people out there that care for you. And when they see you fall off the wagon, as we call it, I know that you feel ashamed that you've done something wrong per se, but the reason why you may get those negative feelings from the people around you usually it's not because they're really mad at you. It's because they love you and they want to see you succeed. Now, throughout the course of my recovery, I found a few useful things that I can do to help heal that spiritual sickness and eventually help me overcome my fears. And like I said, my fears were running rampant. The first thing that I did was I wrote out a list of all the people that I had resentments towards. And for me, it was important to go back as far back in history as I can remember. Now, some people will have pages and pages and pages of resentments. For me, it was just big events in my life. I was abused physically, sexually, emotionally. And so the people that committed those acts on me, I had resentments for. So those were big events in my life that I would write out as a resentment. And then, some things in my upbringing, some things with my parents. But, some people write out everything from, the guy that shortchanged me 15 cents at the grocery store. It's whatever you feel that you've been wronged in some way. Write out a list. And then I want you to take that list and write out the specific harm that was caused. And then I want you to write out another column of what that harm affected, whether it be your self-esteem, your relationships, your pride, your financial security. And then in the last column, if you can write out how you played a role in that resentment. Now, this is where it gets a little bit complicated for some people. When you're a kid and you're abused, people say, well, how do I have a role in that? Well, the role isn't while you were a child. The role is you as an adult. How are you being selfish and self-centered by maintaining a resentment on something that happened such a long time ago? Now, I know that can be hard to accept, but just trust the process. If you can identify how you played a role in your resentments, you can flip the switch on that resentment and see when you take control of it by identifying your own role to play in that resentment, you can move past it. And it's been said by a lot of very smart people over the years that resentments are to die for an addict or an alcoholic. For most people, they can cause a lifetime of sadness and sorrow, but you have to remember that we're addicts and alcoholics. Our disease wants us to die. That is the end result. There is no other outcome. You're either going to end up in jail for the rest of your life, you're going to end up in an institution because you've lost your mind, or you're going to die. So that's it. And I mean, eventually, if you continue to use, you will die because we're putting harmful substances into our body. Eventually, you're going to die. And we have to remember that our addiction is manipulative. It's almost like a parasite. It can manipulate you into doing what it wants you to do, which is to consume your drug of choice until you, as the host, can no longer maintain life, and then it moves on, however it does that. But it's that's why they call it a disease or sickness. It is very much that. And what I've learned is that spiritual wellness. Now, don't freak out when I say spiritual wellness. You certainly don't have to um, find God or find religion. I personally am not a big fan of religion, but I do like to meditate, and I feel like I have a spiritual connection with the universe. But when you have a spiritual connection with the universe and you can clear out the rubble of your past, this ball of garbage that's blocking your ability to experience the good around you, you clear that out like shoveling it out. Um, that's when we free up the space to be able to have a connection with our higher power, whatever that may be, which in turn allows us to maintain our sobriety one day at a time. So I'll give you an example of a resentment that I had. It was for a young man that I met when I was also a young man. I had a problem with him because he was doing something to a girl that I had a crush on. I mean, we were both adults, but we were very early 20s. Maybe I was 19 or 18. I'm not really sure. And my whole life, I really just had resentment because he was the guy that knocked my teeth out. I was very young, and it really sucked losing my teeth that early because I didn't have coverage. I didn't have a way to get them fixed. So for many years, I lost out on job opportunities. I lost out on relationship opportunities because all of my teeth were crushed out of my face. You can actually still see the bottom ones are all broken there. The top ones I have fixed, fortunately. Um, but in clearing out the wreckage of my past by looking at my resentments, that was one of the resentments that I had to talk about with myself. And it was really hard for me to find how I played a role in that resentment. But I eventually was able to, because what happened that evening when that happened was I had asked him to come meet me in a dark, empty parking lot in the middle of the night because I wanted to give him a talking to. And when he showed up, I started talking, and the next thing I remember, I woke up on the ground with all my teeth knocked out of my face. So my role was that I was threatening violence in an uncomfortable situation long before he ever showed up. He just made the decision to preemptively attack and to shut me up, which, I deserved at the time. And I'm not mad about that anymore because now maybe some people would have identified that long ago that I played a role by threatening violence and making him meet up with me in an uncomfortable and dangerous situation. But my alcoholic and addict mind didn't see that. I just saw that he was in the wrong. He hurt me and he caused me a lifetime of problems. So now that I can see it, now that I was able to see that my role in it, I took back control of that situation and I was able to let it go. So I recommend that once you've written out all of the um, resentments that you have for other people, you want to take a, a step back, and then I want you to write about why you resent yourself. That's a real tough one. And when you're doing this, it's not looking at why you resent yourself for the things that you did to other people. I had to look at why I resent myself for the things that I did to myself. So when I'm writing that out, so for instance, I'm mad at myself because I stole something from somebody, let's say. So that's one way to look at it, that I stole something from someone. But how did it affect me? It affected me morally. It affected my moral compass. So how did I injure myself by stealing from somebody else? I injured myself by making myself less trustworthy. So there's two ways to look at it. Am I mad at myself because I did something to somebody else, or am I mad at myself because of what I did to myself? When I started going to AA meetings, I had been around the program for a long time, and I expected um, I expected to just stay sober through osmosis. I expected that just by going to meetings that I was just going to be sober. And that's why I believe 99.9% of people that attend meetings end up leaving or not being able to stay sober. A very prominent psychologist once said, faith without works is dead. If you don't put the work in to clear out the spiritual wreckage that you have in your body and in your mind, like I said, you'll never clear out the space to be able to have serenity in your life. Now, I understand it can be hard. I don't have a lot of patience. The day that they were giving out patience, I called in sick. I want to already be there. But what I started to understand as I started to work the program, and I'm not saying you have to work the program in order to stay sober. This is just how I maintain my sobriety. But you do have to put in work. There has to be something more than just abstinence. Because if you just stay abstinent from alcohol and drugs, you'll become what they call stark raving sober, dry drunk, or dry clean. That can drive people nuts. It drove me nuts. I stayed sober for a long time, but I never got anywhere because I didn't understand that once you abstain, that's the first step. And that's what the program of AA, for instance, is all about. It's not about just staying sober, it's about becoming clear in the body and the mind and the soul. Because let me tell you, I was a suicidal drinker. When I went to the liquor store, I bought the largest bottle there was. I drank it as fast as humanly possible. My objective was either to be completely wasted or passed out. My disease wanted me to die, and it almost accomplished it many times. I would drink all of the alcohol that was available to me. I would run out of money and not be able to buy any more alcohol. Then I would borrow money from other people. They would run out of money to borrow to lend to me. Then I would go and I would start stealing Listerine. When the Listerine stopped working, I would then go and I would get a bottle of hand sanitizer and then a bottle of rubbing alcohol, and I would eventually become so sick I'd have to be hospitalized. They'd hook me up to an IV of Valium so that I wouldn't have a seizure while I was detoxing from all the alcohol I had put into my body. And they would have to give me supplements so that my liver would come back to life again because my body would be completely bright yellow and my eyes would be yellow. I've been through that process dozens and dozens and dozens of times. My disease wants me dead. There are two things that I try to keep in my mind at all times. The first is that I can do anything that I want except safely drink. I can never safely drink again. I can never safely use drugs again. I can't do it. And the second thing I try to keep in my mind at all times is I am willing to go to any length, because this is a life and death situation. I was committing suicide on a payment plan, just like smoking. You don't die right away from smoking. Everybody knows what happens. You die from lung cancer, you die from heart disease. Everyone knows what happens when you drink. You drink yourself to death if you're an addict. That's just the way it is. People who are addicted to cigarettes, they die of health conditions related to their cigarettes. People who are addicted to alcohol and can't safely drink will die from their addiction. Same with drugs. So I want you to look at where you are right now today, whether you've been clean and sober for 24 hours, 48 hours, a couple of days, a couple of weeks. Maybe you're not sober yet. That's totally cool. This show is for everybody to listen to try to get a little bit of motivation to just make it through that next hour, that next day. Because that's all we can really ask of ourselves is for sobriety or cleanness for the rest of the day. I want you to remember this. It is possible to stay sober. If somebody had told me a year ago that I was going to be sober, talking to a camera, talking to you about sobriety, I would have told them they were crazy. So I'm going to leave you with all that information. Hopefully, you'll be able to go away and do a little bit of what I've suggested. And remember that if you don't have access to YouTube, you can catch my podcast on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, Deezer, iHeartRadio, the whole works. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you remember when you wake up in the morning, give thanks for the day ahead of you. And at the end of the day, look at just 4 or 5 things that you're grateful for at the end of the day. Just start with that. Start with a quick prayer. Start with a little bit of meditation. You've got this. I know you can do it. You can stay sober. You just need to believe in yourself just a little tiny bit more. And all it takes is one little tiny step. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.